Hi, this is David White coming to you with number 19 in our series we call A Perfect Life, once again from Austin, Texas. Our scripture for tonight is from the 5th chapter of Matthew, verse 13. "Ye are the salt of the earth. But if the salt have lost his savor, wherewith shall it be salted? It is thenceforth good for nothing but to be cast out and to be trodden under foot of men." Now, once again, also we will start with some definitions of terms. First word, we need to not define as much as describe what the ancient world attributed as its attributes, and that's salt. The Romans said that salt was the purest thing in the world, coming from the sun and the sea. So it connoted purity. Then it connoted a preserving nature. Salt, as some people who will see this can remember, when we used to have hog killings and put the meat up, salt the meat real good and put it up in the smokehouse. Didn't have to refrigerate it, and it would just keep for ages, because salt is in fact a preservative. And then maybe the most important attribute of salt is that it adds flavor to food. And by analogy, I suspect Jesus was saying that salt adds flavor to life. I won't do this every time, but for this time I want to show how these verses tie back into the Beatitudes. The purity ties back into the 6 Beatitudes. Says, "Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God." The preservative attribute ties, I think, to the 8th Beatitude. It says, "Blessed are they which are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." And I want to get off message just a second and talk about this beatitude for just a second. There is another way that this thing by opposite could be stated. "Not blessed are they which are persecuted for righteousness and turn tail and run." But then there is a third way that I really personally identify with more than the other two. It's blessed are they which are persecuted for righteousness' sake, and then get to telling themselves what a good guy they are, and old ego sets in, and once the ego sets in, then the whole thing is gone. I'm often reminded of old Elijah, who was said to have killed, I think it was 400 prophets of the pagan god Baal, and then got to basking in how good he was, and little old 90-pound woman Jezebel got mad at him and threatened him, and he ran 200 miles to hide out in a cave to get rid of her. Well, I have certainly lived this whole thing of my ego coming up there, and then that old fear setting in one more time. And then the second word that we want to look at is savor. Now, the dictionary, one of the definitions it gives for savor is a distinctive quality. But maybe it's best identified uh, by the opposites that the dictionary gives. It says the opposites are flatness, staleness, and unpalatable. And certainly that's true of life that's not preserved. And then he goes on to say, but if salt has lost his savor, wherewith shall it be salted? It is thenceforth good for nothing but to be cast out and be trodden underfoot. Now, in the first sentence there, Jesus was paying the highest tribute he could pay to a human being. He was essentially saying that when you're the salt of the earth, you're pure, you have a preserving nature. Going back to that eighth beatitude, blessed are they which are persecuted for righteousness' sake. Now, another way to paraphrase this is the person who is persecuted for righteousness' sake and holds his ground has that preservative of the salt in his spine, or the Christ life is preserved, and he doesn't turn and run like it's so easy to do sometimes. And then Christ, by analogy, was saying salt adds flavor to life. The third beatitude, blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth, maybe says this best. The meek can enjoy the full flavor of life, because the meek is somebody who either never had or has gotten rid of that old ego. And Christ said that this is the person that shall inherit the earth, shall experience life fully. And then it gets down to, but if salt has lost its savor, and so forth. And I certainly identify with this story. I once was healthy, very healthy, both physically, mentally, and emotionally. It happened when I was about 12 years old. And then puberty set in, and started getting aggressive. Started taking too much of and the wrong kind of interest in the female gender, and ran across wine. And in the early days, what wine did for me, and I've heard this attested by an awful lot of people who have had the problem with alcohol. What wine did for me was take away that old fear, and it in effect became a very real spirit. And in the early days, I believe that I was, if you'll permit the term, more sober when I'd had a couple of drinks than when I hadn't, because with a couple of 3 shots of booze in me, I could see the world more clearly as it was. And then as time went on, and it stopped working for me, then I had to double up to try to catch up, and it just never happened. So I was chasing my ego. And then the thing about the too much interest in the opposite gender, this is just a matter of chasing sensuality. And then a little later on, I was really hooked on the other two. I started chasing money and with it power. And this is nothing in the world but just chasing a false God. Now the outcome of that was that I made money. In fact, the only real money I've ever made was in this 4 or 5 year period there. The problem was that although I was an honest businessman and gave value for the dollar, I wasn't doing what I was supposed to be doing. I was going against God's will. And that's always, I think, a prescription for catastrophe. So at age 42, the 3 demons that I was chasing took me down to the bottom, where I couldn't live with them and I couldn't live without them. And I crashed and burned. And had to admit that in and of myself, I don't have a clue about how to live this life. And so, when admitted that, God, as I understand Him, took away the need for the booze almost immediately. Took away the need for the sensuality, improper sensuality, shortly thereafter. And I was about 10 years without working and going through 2 divorces and sending 2 kids to college before the money ever totally got gone. And that worked out perfectly, because by the time it was gone, I didn't have any more particular family responsibilities, and just lived in pretty well what we'd call poverty for about 10 years, coming to reclaim some sanity. And so it's been close to 30 years now, trying to, or living in the process of trying to be comfortable in living in God's will as it's dictated in my heart. Now, sometimes I take it back and start trying to run it myself, but that doesn't last long, because I have another little mini crash and burn, and it doesn't take long anymore till once again I'm laughing at my old ego and back comfortable again. So that's it for this time. Hope to see you next time. And between the 2 times, hope you have a good time. Good day.